Someone you know is going to die. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but the moment will come, and when it does, you will do something that no other creature on earth does quite the way you do it. You will gather. You will speak about the dead. You will perform rituals you did not invent. You will feel a grief so specific, so structured, so ancient, that it will seem to come from somewhere deeper than memory. And in that moment, without knowing it, you will be doing something your ancestors did for at least 100,000 years before you were born. Death is the oldest human problem, and the way your species has answered it is stranger, more elaborate, and more revealing than almost anything else in the archaeological record. Here is what nobody tells you about grief. It is not a response to death. It is a technology. It was built, refined, and passed down across hundreds of thousands of years because the groups that processed loss well survived, and the ones that didn't. Your grief is not a wound. It is a tool, and once you understand what it was built to do, the way you experience it will never feel quite the same again. The oldest known evidence of deliberate human burial dates to at least 100,000 years ago. In a cave in Kavzeh, Israel, archaeologists uncovered the remains of ancient humans arranged with care, not scattered, not abandoned. Arranged. Ochre pigment had been placed with the bodies. Grave goods, objects of meaning, accompanied the dead into the earth. This was not accident. This was intention. This was a species that already understood, 100,000 years ago, that the body of someone who mattered deserved more than abandonment. Paleoanthropologist Francesco De Rico has spent decades analyzing the material culture of early humans. What he found at sites across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East revealed something that challenges the comfortable assumption that symbolic thinking, the ability to attach meaning to objects and actions, was a late development in human evolution. It was not late. It was early. It was ancient. Your ancestors were performing symbolic rituals around death long before they were building cities, long before they were farming, long before they were doing almost anything else that we tend to call civilized. But why? Why did death demand ritual? Why couldn't the group simply move on? The answer is written into the structure of your social brain. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar spent years building what became one of the most influential theories in human behavioral science. His research showed that the human neocortex, the outer layer of your brain responsible for complex thought and social processing, grew in direct proportion to the size of the social groups your ancestors lived in. The bigger the group, the bigger the brain required to track every relationship inside it. The average natural human group size, Dunbar found, is approximately 150 people. Every person in that group represents a node in a network of obligations, histories, affections, and dependencies. When someone in that network dies, the network breaks. A node disappears. Every relationship that touched that person has to be renegotiated. Every role that person filled has to be redistributed. Every memory that person carried has to be reassigned to someone else or lost forever. This is not just emotional pain. It is a social crisis. And ritual was the technology your ancestors developed to manage that crisis without the group falling apart. The funeral was not invented to honor the dead. It was invented to hold the living together. Think about what a funeral actually does. It gathers the dispersed members of the group in one place. It gives everyone a shared script, a set of actions and words that removes the burden of improvisation from people who are already overwhelmed. It publicly redistributes the social roles of the dead. It creates a shared memory of the person that the entire group can carry forward together. And it marks a clear boundary between the time when that person was alive and the time when they are not, before and after, then and now. Without that boundary, grief has no shape, and shapeless grief is dangerous. It does not end. It does not transform. It simply persists, corroding the bonds that hold a group together until the group fractures. Your ancestors knew this, not in the language of neuroscience, but in the language of survival. The groups that developed rituals for death were the groups that stayed coherent. The groups that didn't dissolved. Archaeologist João Zilhão has studied the burial practices of Neanderthals. our closest evolutionary cousins who shared the Earth with modern humans for tens of thousands of years. What he found is still debated, still contested, but the evidence increasingly suggests that Neanderthals also buried their dead, that they also placed objects with bodies, that they also, in some form, marked the passage of a life with deliberate action. If this is true, and the evidence grows stronger with every new excavation, it means that the impulse to ritualize death did not begin with our species. It predates us. It may be as old as the genus Homo itself. You did not invent grief rituals. You inherited them from something older than you can imagine. But here is where it gets stranger. The rituals your ancestors performed around death were not just social. They were cognitive. They were doing something specific to the brain of the griever that modern neuroscience is only now beginning to understand. Psychologist George Bonanno at Columbia University has spent decades studying how humans recover from loss. What he found overturned the dominant model of grief that most people still believe. The stage model, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, is not how most people actually grieve. It was a description of therapeutic patients in extreme clinical distress, generalized into a universal theory that doesn't match the data. What Bonanno found instead is that human beings are remarkably, almost uncomfortably resilient in the face of loss. The majority of people who lose someone they love do not develop prolonged grief disorder. They feel acute pain. They mourn. And then, with time and social support, they recover. Not because they are cold, but because their brains were built for exactly this. The social rituals, the gathering, the shared storytelling about the dead, these activate specific neural pathways that process loss and begin the work of social reorganization. Grief, properly ritualized, is self-limiting. It has a built-in endpoint. Your ancestors' funeral rites were, without knowing it, a form of neural maintenance, a way of running the brain through the process it needed to complete in order to function again. Now consider what happens when those rituals are removed. In the modern world, death has been industrialized and privatized. The body is taken away by professionals. The preparation of the dead, which in every traditional culture was performed by the family and community, is now outsourced. The gathering, when it happens, is often brief. The shared storytelling is often shallow. And grief, stripped of its ancient scaffolding, is frequently expected to be resolved quietly, privately, and quickly. 2 weeks of bereavement leave, a socially acceptable window of visible sadness. Then back to work. This is not how your brain was built to process loss. Your brain was built for the long fire, for the night of stories, for the weeks of communal mourning in which the dead person was spoken about constantly, their qualities named, their absence acknowledged again and again until the social network had fully registered that this node was gone and begun the slow work of reconnecting around the gap. Anthropologist Paul Rosenblatt analyzed grief practices across 78 different cultures around the world. What he found was a near-universal pattern: extended communal mourning, repeated ritual, and the gradual reintegration of the bereaved back into the social group over a period of weeks or months. Not days, not 2 weeks, months. In many cultures, the mourning period lasted a year, not because these cultures were more sentimental than yours, but because they understood, through accumulated wisdom, how long the social brain actually needed to process the death of someone it loved. Your ancestors gave grief its full time. You rarely do. And there is one more dimension to ancient death ritual that modern culture has almost entirely lost, and that the archaeological record makes unmistakably clear. The dead were not gone. Not entirely. Not immediately. In burial sites across the ancient world, archaeologists find evidence of continued engagement with the dead long after burial. Food offerings placed at graves, objects added over time, bodies exhumed, moved, and reburied, sometimes months or years after the original interment. In some Neolithic sites, the skulls of ancestors were separated from their bodies, kept, and handled by the living, painted, displayed, incorporated into the life of the community as objects of ongoing relationship. This was not superstition. This was the social brain completing its work. The dead, in these cultures, were not removed from the social network immediately. They were gradually transitioned. Their influence was maintained and then slowly, ritually, allowed to diminish. The living were not expected to simply accept that a person who had occupied a node in their social world for decades was simply gone. They were given a process, a slow, structured, communally supported process for renegotiating that relationship over time. What you call talking to the dead, visiting graves, keeping photographs, feeling the presence of someone who is gone, these are not signs of failure to accept reality. They are the remnants of an ancient and deeply functional process that your brain was built to engage in. You are not stuck. You are running an old program in a world that no longer provides the full environment it was designed for. The grief you feel when you lose someone is not a malfunction. It is the most ancient and most human thing about you. It is your brain doing exactly what it was built to do, registering the loss of a node in its social network, searching for the rituals that will help it process that loss, and reaching, without knowing it, for the fire that your ancestors gathered around for 100,000 years. Someone you know is going to die. And when they do, and when you gather, and when you find yourself saying things you did not plan to say, feeling things you did not expect to feel, staying longer than you meant to stay, know that you are not just grieving. You are doing something your species has been doing since before language, since before cities, since before almost everything that you think makes you human. You are holding the living together. You are keeping the network whole. You are doing the oldest work there is.